Hello folks, I'm LA Little. I want to talk about Bitcoin. I want to talk about distribution. Now I've been asked recently, can you show me distribution? What is the process? What does it mean? There's four stages a market goes through. You've kind of got consolidation, then you've got a markup phase, then you've got distribution, then you have a markdown phase. So if you think about those four, seasons, if you will, Bitcoin is in that distribution phase, it looks like. You can't tell until after the fact, but you can get a pretty good idea while it's going on. And rather than going back, historically and taking something that clearly was distribution after the fact, let's take Bitcoin now and talk about it as it's happening. Let's look at it. Here's the daily chart. So when I look at this daily chart, the thing I'm noticing to begin with is what's happening on these different time frames. If you look at the sector itself, it's gone bearish. And if you look at Bitcoin itself, right, which is up here and down here, it's bearish, fairly extended now. Sideways, it's moved. Now, this was all bullish. All these were bullish. The fact that this is sideways tells you that this has bled long enough to where it's affected the intermediate term time frame. Now let's look at the charts themselves and we can see it. So if you just draw some lines on here, when you have a swing point low and you break it, that takes you lower, and that's this break here, and here's another one there right after it. And then now you've got these swing point lows that all set up, and they're fairly congruent, all of these here. When it breaks on this bar, that's a problem. And let's remember that date. That's like 3 days into November. You get a little bit of a rally back up, right? And then it just gives it up, okay? Now, if you were looking just at the daily, you'd say, okay, maybe this is distribution. Well, that's not really fair, right? Because you don't really get distribution on a daily. That's going to happen on a weekly and a monthly. So now let's talk about Bitcoin on a weekly. Here's the rise up. Now, we're only talking about a year. Settles back down, rises up, goes across, and now it's coming down hard. When I look at this, the real question is, do you start breaking swing points? Well, we did. We broke it here. What is that time frame? Well, lo and behold, we're right in that November time frame that we just talked about on the daily chart. So we basically broke down on the daily, broke down on the weekly at the same time, and then after that, we just escalated down to the downside. Now remember, I said you got markup, well, first you had consolidation down here somewhere over the last couple of years, and we can see that on the monthly when we go there. And eventually you get some sort of a distribution pattern. Now, is this distribution? That's still the question. Well, it's not really distribution until you actually get physical markdown that breaks your long-term time frame. We haven't got that yet. Here's your long-term. If you're looking at the long term, that swing point low that has to break is back here. What is that price point? It's about 74. We can get the number here, 74,436. What was the swing point high? 73,750, and this was the breakout. So you can see that this area right here is the critical area. Matter of fact, if we put up our retest regen zones, we can see that that area has not been tested. And the fact that it has not been tested tells us that the first trip back here should get bought, right? This didn't quite test here, but notice that you got a swing point low there and a swing point high congruently. Let's assume it gets down there and gets its bounce. At least it should get a bounce. Well, if it does and that bounce fails and it comes back down, because if it gets down there and it breaks this swing point low, what you see here on the retest regen, this one, right, that retest regen there, well, this swing point low is going to create a retest regen as well. So you would expect that this would come down, get some sort of a bounce back up, and if it really has turned, and if this really is distribution up here that's taking place over time, this should turn back down. And that's when you would expect your escalation to begin. And so the key level here is about 74K. You bust that 74K, it's going to be a problem. I would expect that you're going to test it, probably bounce off of it, and do what? Distribute up here longer. That's typically the way these things work, if in fact this is distribution at this point in time. And so, going back to, Bitcoin is not the best example because Bitcoin is fairly extreme, right? It has huge swings up and down. And so, this could get a swing down into here and actually go make new highs. So it's a little early to call this distribution. Bitcoin, a little hard to call it. But if you look back here, right, this is more or less what I'm talking about when I'm talking about distribution, right? You've got this consolidation at the top, so to speak, some sort of a range that develops. That's kind of what you're seeing here, a range that's developed. And if it finally breaks a swing point low on a monthly, right, that's going to turn into distribution. So that's the way it looks to me. Is this over? Well, not quite. Is it hanging by a thread? Yes. Is it going to bounce? Probably. It may get a little bit of a bounce here. Maybe it comes back. It would actually be fairly difficult now for this to get back over this price point, which is about 107. 108 actually. Let's get the number, 108,915. That's probably not going to happen. More than likely, you're going to see some sort of a bounce. Maybe it's going to go deeper and then get the bounce. Maybe it's going to do both. But it's probably going to work its way back up into this area. And that is going to allow this whole area, right, to become sort of a distribution pattern over time. And that would be this distribution that you're seeing right over here right now on the monthly. That's distribution. That's where Bitcoin is. Bitcoin, I had a nice ride in this, like many. I bought a little bit on the way up. I got my average price in somewhere in here, the majority, of my shares. Traveled up here and had to dump it out at about 106 average. Let's see where it heads. That's the way Bitcoin stacks up in my time frames. Take care.